is one of those days on the calendar. You know, somebody just mentions December 25th, and we immediately think Christmas, right? It's one of those dates that everybody knows. And it's interesting that of all the 365 or 66 days on our calendars, there are certain ones that we immediately know what they are. And others don't really matter so much, but there's certain ones that everybody just knows. For example, take a look. We see that and we say, right. Okay, keep going. Next one. We see that and we say, right. Groundhog Day. All right. Next one. It's amazing how many of these just come. What was that? Carl and Lori's anniversary. Oh, yeah. March 17th. Personally, one of my favorite holidays, St. Patrick's Day. I love St. Patrick's Day. April 1st? We all know that. April 1st. What's next? May 5th? Cinco de Mayo. Right. Next one, July. Independence Day, 4th of July. Next one. Sorry, that's our anniversary. It's my birthday. Next one. Right? Next one. Veterans Day, right? Veterans Day and Christmas Day. December 25th. Christmas Day, and we celebrate it because it's the day that Jesus was born. However, not everybody believes that December 25th was actually the day that Jesus was born. In fact, there's quite a debate out there about whether or not tomorrow is the day, or whether or not somebody at some point just decided, I just like December 25th. Let's make it the day that Jesus was born, and let's all agree and celebrate. There is a huge debate out there. And there's actually an interesting path of thought. Among the people who don't think that December 25th was the actual day that Jesus was born, there's this path of thought where people thought, well, it wasn't the day. In fact, nobody knows the day because there weren't birth certificates, there weren't hospital records in the days of Jesus. So, yeah, how would we know that that's actually the day? So they think that at some point, people realized, well, December 25th, according to the calendars in the early centuries, was the day of the winter solstice. That's what they thought of as the shortest day of the year and the darkest day of the year. And so they thought that Christians in those centuries said, hey, wait a minute. Jesus said he was the light of the world. Let's put Jesus born on that day to bring light to the darkest day of the world. I mean, pretty cool, right? I think it's a cool connection, if it were true. But it highly likely is not true. Thanks to this guy, Hippolytus of Rome. This guy was a genius. He loved dates and details and schedules and figuring things out. I mean, he was just meticulous. He wrote all kinds of books. He wrote all kinds of calendars that described when events happened, when all kinds of things occurred that people didn't realize, and he was super interested in the events of the Bible and when they happened. So his statue is in the Vatican Library. We can all go see it if we travel there. And on the back of his chair and the sides of his chair are inscribed all the different dates and things that he figured out. This guy lived at the end of the 2nd century and early 3rd century. So it was 170 to like 220. Only, a number of generations after the days of Jesus. And way before all of those festivals of when the winter solstice were actually celebrated. And he figured out that the birth of Jesus was on, actually he figured out that the conception of Jesus was on March 25th. 9 months later, December 25th. And it was believed and understood that that was the case very early on. It seemed that the early church was very clear about when Jesus was born. And God does some really miraculous things to help us understand and be clear about Jesus, especially at Christmas. In fact, the things that God does to help us understand and be clear about Jesus are a lot like presents. Of course, presents are on the minds of many, and there's two kinds of presents that we tend to get. There's the presents that are the things that we've asked for. You know, those are the things that we kind of expect that we're getting. We shake the package, we look at the shape, we pick it up, we know the weight, and we're like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And then there's the other kind of presents where we're like baffled. You know, I have no idea what this is. It was not on my list, and I don't have a clue. Even after smelling it, shaking it, picking it up, throwing it around, I have no idea what it is. And then we open it up and we're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Some of the things that God does for us to help us be clear about Jesus are some of the most shocking or odd or strangest things that we weren't even expecting. And we don't have to look any farther than the first few pages of the biographies about Jesus. They all have these shocking, wild, strange stories that are there to help us be clear about Jesus. One of the strangest ones, but one of the clearest ones also, is from the book of Matthew. If you've ever opened the book of Matthew, like most of us, right at the beginning, you start reading, and then very quickly you turn the page. Because what you're reading is very odd and strange. But it is one of the coolest things for how to be clear about Jesus. Have you recently been to any sort of a lecture or an academic presentation, maybe an official sort of speech or presentation or a graduation, something like that, where there's a keynote speaker, you know, somebody who's quite important or quite well regarded, comes up to speak, but what happens right before that person comes up to speak? Yeah, they get introduced, yeah. And so there's somebody who comes up and they read the resume of the person and they talk about how accomplished the person is and what schools they went to and the degrees they got and where they've worked and where they've served and all the things that they've done. And why do we do that? I mean, it helps us understand a little bit more about the person so that whatever they say makes a little more sense. Matthew introduces Jesus so that Jesus might make a little more sense to us. But the way Matthew introduces him is odd. For them, family was everything. If you had the right name, if you had the right background, the right family history, the right lineage, if you were born in the right place with the right group, then you had some clout. And so it was important to be part of a certain name or a certain family. And that's what Matthew's starting with. So here's the beginning of the book of Matthew. This is the record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of David and Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. And by now we're asleep. We don't need to go much farther because it kind of gets blurry and dizzy with all the names, especially names that were like, I don't know that name. I don't know that person. So it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of difference to us. And that's when we turn the page to Matthew chapter 2 because we're looking for the miracles, or we're looking for the story, or the cool thing Jesus taught, or how Jesus showed down some of the people. And instead we get this right off. So what is Matthew doing? Well, the first thing he says is super good news to all of us. That Jesus was a descendant of David and a descendant of Abraham. If you were one of the people in Jesus' day who's hearing this, you'd be like, awesome, I'm part of the family. And this guy who's coming is part of the family. When he mentions King David, I mean, that's like one of the most renowned people in their story, in their history. You know, when they think about the biggest moments and the biggest times in the days of and the work of God, they think about Moses and they think about David. And so if Jesus is coming from the family of King David, people are like, this is our God. We understand where he's coming from, and we're on board with this. And if he's coming from the line of King David, then, oh, King David promised that there would be another who came after him to reign on his throne forever. This guy must be big. But that was only if you were in the family line of King David, if you were in that group. What about all the others? Well, thank Matthew for Abraham. Because when Abraham came on the scene early on, God said, you will be the father of all nations. Abraham's the one who opens the door for a relationship with God to everybody, not just the people of the family, but to everybody in all the nations. So Matthew's saying this guy, Jesus, is a descendant of this group, but also of this group. Everybody gets to be invited in to have a relationship with God, and Jesus is part of that. So there's something big that's happening here. As we trickle down through this family tree, this genealogy, there are some wild things in here. And as we start to read in this first sort of section, before the first break, there are all kinds of names in there. Some names that are familiar. You know, we know Abraham, we know Isaac, we've heard of Jacob. We know some of these names, perhaps a couple others. But then there are lots of other names that we have no idea who these people are. We don't know their story, we don't know where they came from. So why are they all there? This is the story of familiarity. If we're familiar with some of these people, then I understand where this person's coming from. I can trust them. I can know something about them. I have some reason to learn a little bit more. In the second section, once we get down there's an odd group of people. The second section of people, we might know a couple of the people, like David and like Solomon, and those people were kings. As we look on with some of the other names, these other people are kings also. But the strange thing is, they're not all really good. David and Solomon, of course, did good things and great things and grand things, but not some of the others. In fact, there's a method to Matthew's madness. He lists a good king, and then he lists a bad king. He lists a good king, and then he lists a bad. He's flip-flopping back and forth between some of these kings. You know, Solomon was amazingly good, and then Rehoboam and Abijah were really awful. And then Asa and Jehoshaphat were good, but then Jehoram was bad. Why does he include the bad kings? I mean, if I was writing a family tree trying to say, this is the person you gotta listen to, I wouldn't include the bad people. I would include the people who messed up and who really screwed up and who did horrible things that we have bad stories about. I'd include the people with the shining, gleaming stories. Like, look how great they are. But Matthew doesn't. Matthew's saying, I don't need to make Jesus look perfect. Because he came for anybody. He came for the ones who've been upright and faithful, and he came for the ones who haven't. And there's no shortage of people who are on both sides in Jesus' family tree, and that's just fine. Because that's who Jesus came for. There's also some really strange people who are listed in this family tree. It's not that the people are strange so much as their presence in the list. In their day, and we see it, it's so-and-so is the father of so-and-so, and so-and-so is the father of so-and-so, and on with fathers and fathers. They trace their family line through fathers. But in this family tree, there are 5 women. There are 5 names of women who are in the family line of Jesus. There was Tamar and Rahab and Ruth and Uriah's wife Bathsheba and Miriam. Why are 5 women in the genealogy? And Why are there 5 women whose stories are similar and on the same level as some of those bad kings? Why are we including these? I mean, we should not be retelling some of the stories of these people, the kings and the women. There's inappropriate relationships. There are children born out of confusion. There are immoral things happening. There are all kinds of issues behind all of these names of these people and these women. So why are they there? Same reason as before. Jesus came for everyone. And there is zero shame that Jesus has to welcome anybody into his family tree. And even the people that we don't expect to be in Jesus' family, oh, those are the ones who should be in Jesus' family, just like you and me. So down at the end, it's one last strange thing when we get down to the actual Jesus part of this. Look at the last couple lines of the genealogy. These are unpronounceable names, but that's okay, we'll get through it. Eliud was the father of Eliezer, and Eliezer was the father of Matthan, and Matthan was the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Now, if Matthew was keeping the pattern, he shouldn't have said this. He should have said, Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Joseph was the father of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. But he didn't. He doesn't get to Jesus through Jacob. He gets to Jesus through Mary. Why? Because Jacob wasn't the father. That's the remember the story. Joseph has the angel come to him, and the angel comes to Joseph. Why? To say, don't get rid of Mary. Joseph was ready to just get rid of Mary because she was pregnant. And he had no idea and nothing to do with it. And he's like, I'm engaged to you, and you're going to have a baby. What's going on? The angel said, no, this is okay because the Holy Spirit brought this baby into the world. You're good. Take her as your wife. The story is that God is doing something great and grand through Mary. Why did God choose Mary? Because God chose Mary. Why did God choose any of us? Because God chooses us. It's out of God's grace and love that he does. Have you noticed that Mary always wears blue? You know, like every portrait, every stained glass window, every caricature, every cartoon, Mary's in blue. Why is Mary in blue? Well, back in the 13th and 14th centuries, late medieval times, the trade around the European nations was growing. People were super interested in finding all the innovative and exciting new places and new textures and fabrics and spices and all sorts of things. And trade was growing. They had lots of opportunity for trade. So as they expanded through the East Indies, like the Middle East that we know and farther beyond, they encountered lots of new things that they enjoyed, things that they could smell, things they could taste, things they could bring back home that people were like, wow, that's so cool. They found, as they were trading and traveling, they found a dye that they had never seen and actually didn't exist in their area. It only existed in certain mines in certain places. And it was so vibrant. And it was what we know as lapis lazuli. That super bright, deep blue color. And they found this pigment, and they're so excited. So the traders said, well, we found this, and they brought it back to Europe. And who got really excited about this blue dye? Artists. They're like, this is beautiful. Look what I can do with this. And it was only the artists who had lots of means or who were well supported by wealthy patrons who could use it because it was as expensive at the time as gold. It was precious. So they used this, and when they used this, They didn't get a lot of it, so they didn't like paint the sky with it. They didn't paint the ocean with it. They accented the most common figure that they painted at the time. Parents. God chose and made Mary special because God just did. Just like God chooses any one of us to make us special, to make us clear about God's love. May this Christmas be a moment for you to understand, for all of us to understand, for people beyond us to understand and be clear about who Jesus is and the great and grand love that God has for you and for me. Would you pray with me?